Whiplash, directed by Damien Chazelle, is a gripping story that follows the journey of a young and ambitious jazz drummer, Andrew Neiman, as he gets entangled into this absolutely vicious game of psychological warfare with his intimidating and abusive instructor, Terence Fletcher. It's a deep character study and really digs into the idea of what it really takes to achieve artistic greatness. So in this video, I'm going to flesh out the plot points of Whiplash, using Dan Harmon's story circle to sort of explain the meaning behind the film. He's a talented drummer with aspirations of being one of the greatest jazz musicians. He's definitely on the right track. He's a drummer at the prestigious Schaefer Conservatory, which in this universe is essentially Juilliard. So what does he need? What's his motivation? He wants to become the greatest living jazz drummer. Simple as that. But one step below that is that he craves validation and success. And this all stems from how he views his own father, who was a failed writer in his time and now is just a teacher. So Neiman doesn't really respect his father and is just desperate to end up different to him. So the plot really gets rolling once Terence Fletcher hears Neiman playing the drums in the practice hall. Fletcher is as well known for his teaching as well as his terrifying methods.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Rushing or dragging?
Rushing.
So you do know the difference.
But essentially, an endorsement from Fletcher really gives you a head start in the jazz world. This first encounter is really frosty, and it seems like Neiman's really just blown his chance here. But eventually, at another practice, Fletcher interrupts and calls Neiman to join his studio band. And of course, Neiman is absolutely stoked by this and he jumps at that opportunity. So at the very first practice, it's very apparent that Fletcher's methods are sink or swim. Well, more like throwing you in the deep end and then holding you down and drowning you. And then if you somehow survive, congratulations. He doesn't provide any guidance. He just walks into the room and expects things to happen, and expecting his whole band to just automatically reach his standard or just get the hell out. As a result, it's just fostered this really competitive and cutthroat environment within the band. Neiman, as a newbie, he joins and no one wants to show him the ropes. No one really wants to help him out. Practice is extremely intense. This one guy just absolutely crapping his pants and losing it and just bailing. And Neiman, luckily, having some extreme reflexes, manages to avoid getting decapitated. Neiman is a little rattled, but he persists through the practice. He's now determined to prove himself to Fletcher and to win his approval. And he sort of views this as a checkpoint that he needs to pass in order to achieve greatness. He feels like he needs to submit to Fletcher's abuse, and he needs to suffer both physically and emotionally to be successful in his craft. We then get to a performance where the lead drummer has actually lost his music and is unable to play. And Neiman steps up because he's memorized everything off by heart. He's prepared for this moment and he plays the piece and smashes it, and Fletcher now awards him that top spot. But even after earning that top spot at the very next practice, Fletcher forces Neiman to compete for it again, causing Neiman to feel like, no matter how good he thinks he is, he's actually never going to be enough. So instead of sort of coming to terms with that, he sort of doubles down and he becomes absolutely obsessed with meeting Fletcher's standard. He redoubles his efforts and practices to the extreme, causing himself physical harm. He breaks up with his girlfriend, viewing his girlfriend as an obstacle to his success, someone that's gonna hold him back from being what he thinks he needs to be.
And I would stop you from doing that?
Yeah.
And to top that all off, he almost gets killed in a car accident trying to get to the performance, but he's so desperate to perform and do well in front of Fletcher that he pushes through. And obviously, due to the car accident at the performance, Neiman doesn't do well, which is fair enough. I mean, the guy's literally just bleeding all over the place. His arm's probably broken, but because of this mess up, Fletcher just kicks him out of the band. And in that moment, Neiman just snaps. He completely loses it and he attacks Fletcher. And because of all that mess, Neiman's kicked out of the band, he's kicked out of the conservatory, and he sees his path to greatness just completely derailed. So he decides that, screw it, I'm not ever playing the drums again. He packs up all his stuff, he takes down all his posters, and he just wants to live a normal life. Neiman then learns of another student that unfortunately ended their life, and a large portion of that was due to Fletcher's treatment of them. And he's essentially asked to snitch against Fletcher to get him fired, which he rightfully does. And now Neiman comes to the realization that greatness shouldn't come at the expense of your personal well-being, resolving his initial motivations. Oh, wait, no, we go again. Now Neiman, having given up everything, he has a chance encounter with Fletcher at a jazz club, and the two men sit down and have a heart-to-heart. Fletcher seemingly not aware that Neiman was the one that got him fired. Neiman actually confronts Fletcher about his techniques, but Fletcher defends his methods, believing that greatness can only truly be achieved when talent gets pushed to the absolute brink.
There are no two words in the English language more harmful than good job.
Fletcher then offers Neiman the opportunity to play in his band at the JVC Fest, and this is another opportunity for Neiman to get back in the game, to get back on the track that he initially set out on, and it just reignites his desire to become, the greatest jazz musician. So he just completely switches back to his previous mode, goes crazy practicing, pretty much having learnt nothing from his previous experience, and goes all out to prove to Fletcher that he's still got it. Come again to the performance, they're on the stage, and Fletcher reveals in front of an audience that the jazz band will be playing a piece that he never told Neiman about and that Neiman had never played. Neiman tries his best to play along, but obviously it just sounds like absolute doo-doo, and he completely embarrasses himself. Fletcher, now really happy with himself, having gotten one back on Neiman for getting him fired, and Neiman goes to pack his stuff and goes to leave. But Neiman turns around and realizes that at this point, he's got nothing left to lose. He's already lost it all, and he might as well just give it another shot. He goes back to the kit and starts playing the piece that he initially practiced. And he pretty much just pressures the band to just go along with it to avoid them looking like there was some mishap. He then plays an absolutely epic drum solo. Fletcher, initially irate with Neiman essentially hijacking his performance, suddenly switches and becomes extremely impressed and is essentially mesmerized by what Neiman is doing, and he starts to go along with it and even encouraging Neiman for the very first time. And what Neiman is playing is genius, and Fletcher can't deny that. And in this moment, everything is sort of validated. Fletcher is genuinely overjoyed by what he's witnessing. His methods actually worked. He pushed Neiman so much to the point that now Neiman's genius is finally bursting out. And now Neiman, finally having gotten Fletcher's approval, Neiman is completely validated into thinking that you can never stop being vigilant, not even for a moment. And in a way, his own self-destructive tendencies and Fletcher's abusive and terrifying tactics was actually a necessary component to propel him to this point, to propel him to be great. And this is the darker lesson that Neiman ultimately takes away from all of this. He'd already gone through the first journey and he'd been spit out. He'd snitched on Fletcher because he understood at that moment that Fletcher's methods were extremely dangerous and abusive and shouldn't be tolerated. But because he craved validation and success, it caused him to lose sight of everything he learned and to get sucked right back in. And this perspective is shown through Neiman's father, who watches Neiman perform the drum solo of his life, and initially, he's proud, he's happy, he's amazed that his son can do this, but that feeling slowly dissipates because he starts to realize and becomes horrified that this is the extent that Neiman will go just to get Fletcher's approval. And Neiman is willing to accept all this punishment for this chance at glory. I think it's safe to say that, we've all had tough teachers at some point. When I was much younger, I had an extremely strict piano teacher that I was terrified of, and I would be practicing piano not for the purpose of getting better at piano, but just for the fact I didn't want to get yelled at or scolded. And even just watching this film, it reminded me of those moments in class I would be so scared to say the wrong thing or make a mistake because of the reaction that a teacher would give. But the key theme of Whiplash is the cost of greatness. To achieve greatness, do you really need to be pushing yourself to this absolute extreme and just sacrifice everything? If that's true and you do need to push yourself to this extreme to get greatness, is that really worth it? Personally for me, I'm not saying that I thought I was destined to do something great or anything like that, but previously I did feel like I wanted to do more or be more. And while I'm sure not everyone feels that way, I'm sure a lot of you out there do. A lot of people want more for themselves. A lot of people look at their parents and they want to surpass what their parents did. And a lot of people just believe that they're special or have that potential for greatness. Neiman really battles with this idea. He feels he has this potential and wants to make sure he can squeeze it all out of himself and become the greatest. And he's so clearly desperate, he's willing to just give up everything for it. When his path to greatness was initially cut off, he just chose to completely abandon it. He didn't want to play drums at all. If he wasn't going to be the best, he just didn't want to do it at all. He just didn't see the point. And it was only until another path opened itself up for him that he dove right back in. I don't think the film is trying to tell us what the right path is or isn't. I mean, it can't, because that's a choice that everyone needs to make for themselves. From my own personal perspective, I think there's a balance to everything. Yes, you do want to maximize your potential, and yes, you do want to chase your dreams. And yes, pushing yourself will cost you. You will have to sacrifice things. Maybe you need to sacrifice going out and drinking.
No alcohol?
Maybe you need to sacrifice hanging out with your friends all the time. Maybe you need to have some sleepless nights so you can practice. But everyone should know their limits and what they shouldn't be forced to sacrifice. And that's for your family and your own personal well-being. Neiman could just never strike this balance. He was either all the way in or all the way out. And from the perspective of Whiplash, there is no fairy tale ending in that pursuit for greatness. Anyways, hope that all made sense. I'll see you guys in the next video.